is Rebecca, and I'd like to share with you how God has delivered me from depression and anger and very poor self-esteem. Um, I've loved God ever since I can remember. I was baptized when I was 5 years old, and there's never been a time that I can ever remember not knowing God and not loving God. But I can't say that I've always had a very close personal relationship with God. When I was very young, a member of my family who I was very, very close to molested me. And I felt betrayed. I felt gross. I felt all sorts of different emotions, anger, hatred. But the biggest one was always betrayal. And I trusted this person. They were one of my favorite people in the whole world. And the type of kid that I was always see the bright side of things, see the best in people, make excuses for people. And that's what I did for him. I made excuses, and I tried to come up with any reason why he would do this other than the truth. And some of the excuses I tried to use were he's getting older, and sometimes when people get old, they lose their mind. They don't remember things, and maybe he subconsciously thinks that I'm his wife. Maybe he doesn't realize what he's doing. Maybe, I just made all sorts of different excuses for him. And it wasn't until I was much older that I realized to the full extent of what had happened to me. And I didn't realize until then that I was not his first. And it really, really messed with me. He was a very well-known person who was high up in the church and supposed to be someone you could trust, supposed to be someone that you look up to. And that could have really made me bitter and jaded towards all men, but God protected me and didn't allow that to happen. But I didn't realize all of the anger and hatred that was being stored up in me until much later on. As a teenager, I had something similar happen at a youth group, again in a place where you're supposed to be safe, a place that is supposed to be full of good people. And again, it helped to store up bitterness. It helped to store up anger, and I didn't realize how angry I was becoming. At the age of 16, the wife of the man who molested me died, and I was devastated. I felt like she was such a good person and brought so much good into the world. I was angry at God and asked him why would he take her instead of him. I felt like she would have added so much more good to the world while he was just adding evil. And I was angry that God would let him live and would take her. In the same month that she passed away, the man that I loved decided to move across the country. And again, I was devastated, and that was a very hard time for me. Within about 6 months, though, he moved back to Missouri, and we got married shortly after. I was very excited at the prospect of being able to be married to my best friend. I had all of these visions of how marriage was going to be and how wonderful it was going to be. I knew the kind of wife that I wanted to be, the kind of family we wanted to raise. I had all these ideals and plans for the future. And within weeks of our marriage, I was hit with the realization that my husband was very much different than what I always believed him to be. He was not the man that I had always thought he was. And it started off a very, very difficult chapter of our lives. We couldn't find a place to live, and so we started renting his mom's guest house. And that's where I first had my first experience with the supernatural. While living there, we were living with several other people in the house, and they all had day jobs, so they would all leave early in the morning, and I was a stay-at-home wife. We only had one vehicle, and so I wasn't able to go do anything because my husband would use the vehicle for getting to work. And we started having things go missing, and things just randomly weird would happen around the house. And they weren't small things that went missing. It was large things like cast iron skillets, larger things that don't just randomly disappear. So I started believing that someone was sneaking into the house and taking things. So every day, whenever all the others would go to work, I would immediately lock all the doors, lock all the windows, make sure that nobody could get in. And then I would go back to bed because they would all leave really early in the morning and I didn't have anything better to do. One day, I woke up after going back to bed and I had the word written on my arm in permanent marker, "Hi." And it terrified me because it was not my handwriting. We didn't have any permanent markers in our bedroom. I kept my bedroom door locked just in case anybody did get in the house. They hopefully couldn't get into my bedroom. So I realized that there was something demonic in my house and that it was targeting me for some reason. That it would mess with the magnets on the fridge after everybody else was out of the house. There was nobody else in the house but me, and I experienced the spirit of fear majorly. I was terrified when my husband got home that day after I found the word written on my arm. I was inconsolable. I've never been that scared in my life, and he was trying to comfort me, and it wasn't working. He offered to teach me how to shoot, and my response was, what good is that going to do against something supernatural? And he didn't know how to help me. So I called my dad and shared with him. They lived in a different state at this time. And he reminded me that as a child of God, we have authority. And he reminded me, that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love and of power and of a sound mind. And he told me to start walking through the house and starting to command the spirit out of the house. So I walked through every room of that house, shouting and telling the spirit that it was not welcome in my home. I'm a child of God, and it has to leave in Jesus' name. We didn't have any more episodes after that day, and soon after, we were able to move into our own apartment. After we moved to our apartment, I really thought everything was going to get a lot better. I was thinking, okay, now we can start our family. We're not living with a bunch of other people now. We can get life going the way that we'd always planned. Well, I was not the wife that he wanted me to be, and he was not the husband that I always imagined him to be. And we had a really, really rough first few years. We both really wanted kids right off, but I was having trouble getting pregnant. He wanted me to be a stay-at-home mom. I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, but that's hard to do when you're not a mom. So I fell into depression. I felt like a failure. I felt like a failure as a wife, a failure as a Christian. And I became addicted to a virtual reality game. On that game, I could be whoever I wanted to be. I could dress whatever way I wanted to dress. I had friends. I had everything that I could want in a game. And as a result, the housekeeping was left to the side. And I became completely absorbed in this game, and everything that was real fell to the side, and I lived in a virtual reality. So one day when my husband got home from work, normally he would greet me, and this time he didn't say a word. He just went into the bathroom and shut the door, shut me out. When I finally got him to confide in me what was going on, he shared that all the guys at his work were talking about their wives. They were all comparing their wives, and all the other wives were all these amazing people. You know, this one had a high-paying job and she was able to contribute a lot to the finances. This one was able to cook like a top chef. This one, you know, she has this many babies and still has the perfect body. And when asked Jeremiah, my husband, when asked about his wife, the only response he could get is, she sits on the computer all day and the house is a wreck, and he didn't have anything good to say. And that was a huge wake-up call. It didn't wake me up in the way that it should have, though. Instead, it sent me deeper into depression. We started drinking every weekend, and then we started getting high every weekend. And that seemed to make things better. It seemed like we were able to talk better when we were drunk or high. We were able to have a better relationship. But in reality, my self-esteem was going down the drain. And again, a lot of it was, I couldn't get pregnant, I didn't have a job, and I felt worthless. I felt like there was no point in my existence. So, one night I was drunk and high, and my self-esteem had gone so low that I decided I was gonna put myself out with the trash, because I felt like that's all that I was. So, I made my way down to the dumpster of the apartment building, and I sat down next to the dumpster, and I decided that I was just gonna wait there until the dump truck came and took me away, because that's all I was garbage. I didn't have any plan for after the dump truck came and took me. That was just in the moment. But my husband eventually came and found me and tried to talk me into coming back into the apartment. And at that point, I didn't want to talk to him. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I just wanted to disappear. So I took off barefoot in my pajamas across town, and he started following me. It was late at night, so it was dark, and I still believe it was only by the grace of God that the police didn't pick us up. But we were running all over town, and I probably would not have come back except for the fact that I tripped and fell into a ditch and was almost knocked unconscious. And at that point I thought, okay, fine, I'll go back to the apartment, but mainly only because my feet hurt and I have a headache. So we made it back to the apartment, and I still struggled with self-esteem and depression, but I ended up getting a job. I told my husband I can't do this anymore, and he didn't want me to get the job, but I told him I had to. So I got a job, and shortly after, we had the opportunity to buy a house in a different town. So to me, this was the opportunity to start fresh. It was an opportunity to get away from the small town we were in and start new. Start going to a new church, start going to, because at that point we had quit going to church. And it was just, it seemed like a good opportunity all the way around. So we bought the house, we moved to a different town, and we started looking at different churches, trying to figure out where we could go that would get our lives back on track. So not long after we moved, I found out that I was pregnant. After 3 years of unsuccessful attempts, I was finally pregnant. We had a beautiful baby boy, and we decided that we needed to be better parents, and so we would only party when we didn't have him. And so we would send him to my parents' house, and we would still get drunk and high and still just not really living a good lifestyle. When he was about 6 months to a year old, we sent him to my parents and decided to get drunk again. And my husband and I, we got drunk, we got high, and I was playing video games in our bedroom when I realized I hadn't seen my husband in several hours. So I decided to go check on him. I found him passed out in one of our bathrooms. We have one bathroom on each end of our house, and one has a shower, the other does not. So I found him passed out on the floor of the bathroom that does not have a shower. And the main thing I remember is how cold he was and how I could not get him to wake up. So the first thought that hit my head was, I need to get him warmed up. I need to warm him up. And so I dragged him to the other end of the house, to the bathroom that does have a shower, and I somehow was able to dump him into the bathtub and turn the hot water on the shower with him. So once I got him in the shower, he's fully clothed, lying on the bathtub floor with the hot water pouring down on him. And again, I was still high, so not much reasoning. But I guess I felt like I've done what I can. I've got him in the hot water. There's nothing else I can do, and so I went back to my video game. Several hours later, he comes walking into our bedroom, soaking wet, clothes drenched, and shivering. So I'm glad I didn't drown him, but we were able to get him in some dry clothes and into bed. And after that night, we both realized that we had to do better. We had to be parents that our kids could look up to. We had to be able to set a good example for them. And that night, we both quit drinking, we quit smoking, we quit everything. Not long after that, I found out I was pregnant again. And after that, it was kind of back-to-back pregnancies. So after our second was born, I was diagnosed with postpartum depression. And I hadn't realized how badly I was battling with depression until it was coupled with postpartum depression. And at that point, I started having a lot of suicidal thoughts. I was not suicidal, but the thoughts were there. And I'm a very visual person, so a lot of times I would see how I died. And every time I would open the knife drawer in our kitchen, I would visualize slitting my wrists, and I would think about how I would do everything, where I would do everything so that there was less mess for my family to clean up. I would visualize if we were in the car just letting go of the steering wheel and going off of a bridge. And at that point, I'd always been dealing with self-esteem problems. I was bullied a lot as a kid for what I wore, the way my body looked. I'd never had very good self-esteem, but after having kids, it plummeted. And now I have the mommy pooch. Now I have clothes that don't fit me anymore. I didn't like the way I looked in any pictures. I didn't like the way I looked in the mirror. There was one day at church, I was sitting in the sanctuary and I was playing the comparison game. And I was thinking about how every single lady in the church, I could find something about her that I liked better than myself. And I would think about, well, that girl's hair is always perfect. It doesn't matter what time of day it is, her hair is always perfect. And this one, her outfits are always completely coordinated. This one, she has such a contagious personality that she always has friends. She's always surrounded by people that love her. And just no matter who I saw, I would compare myself with them. And as I'm sitting in the sanctuary comparing myself to every single person that was in there, I had a vision of my bathroom mirror. And on my bathroom mirror, I saw the words written, "Do not criticize the Father's work." And it hit me that that's exactly what I had been doing. I am a work of God. He created me, and I was criticizing his work. And the Bible verse reminded me that I am fearfully and wonderfully made. For so long, I didn't think I could have kids. And my body is amazing. My body has grown multiple human beings, and I have stretch marks as proof of that. When I got home that day, I took a permanent marker and I wrote those words on my mirror so that it would be a constant reminder that I might not look the way I'd always wanted to look, but that I look the way that God intended me to look, and that's perfect. We have 4 beautiful kids now, all boys, and it's a very, very strong desire of my heart to have a little girl. I have a whole hope chest full of things for her for someday. And in 2022, I got pregnant again. And I got a name for her. Her name was Adrielle, which means belonging to God. And I knew that this was my little girl. But back in the back of my head, the meaning of her name kept coming to my mind. Belonging to God. And it made me wonder why that name specifically. And it made me concerned that it's because I wouldn't get to keep her. But I knew that couldn't be true because I knew my God wouldn't do that to me. I felt like he and I had a deal. I've already battled depression, and I couldn't handle losing a baby. Especially not after I've become a mom and know how much joy that they bring. I knew that if I were to lose a baby, I would fall so deep into depression that I wouldn't be able to get back out, and it would ultimately end in my death. Shortly after I found out I was pregnant, we were supposed to go on vacation with some family friends. And a day or two before we were supposed to leave, I was very irritable, and I didn't know why. I just had a very, very strong irritability. And I went to go put something away in my office, and I felt a very sharp pain. I immediately knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what or how to go from there. Shortly after, I began bleeding, and I knew that I was losing the baby. Our friends were willing to postpone the vacation, but at that point, I figured there's been enough disappointment for a lifetime. I'm not going to disappoint my kids. I'm not going to disappoint everybody else in canceling the vacation, so we went ahead and went. And honestly, that was God working right there. The family friends that we were with, she had also dealt with loss, and she was able to walk me through it. She and her husband were able to be there for me every step of the way. They were able to share God's peace with me. They were able to help take care of my kids so that I didn't have to worry about anything but taking care of my body. I was able to stay in bed most of the time. and not worry about having to feed my family or keep them out of trouble. They were able to take care of everything for me with my husband. And it was that alone that kept me from falling into a pit of despair that I wouldn't have been able to rise out of. After that, I was the angriest I've ever been in my entire life. I didn't understand why that would happen to me after having 4 healthy pregnancies, having 4 healthy kids. Why would my little girl be snatched from me? Three months later, I found out I was pregnant again. And I was so excited for my rainbow baby. I kept getting the name Nathaniel, and I was in denial because Nathaniel is a boy's name, and I'm gonna have another little girl. But I kept getting the name Nathaniel. Not too long after, I started having the same symptoms, and I knew this baby was a little boy. And soon he was going to be with his sister. I lost that baby in January. And in February, I lost my grandfather to cancer and one of my favorite cousins to cancer within 2 days of each other. I dealt with anger like never before. And I yelled at God. I yelled at him. I screamed at him. I cussed at him. How could he let this happen to me? How could he let me deal with such great loss when I'm trying so hard to live a good life, to be a good Christian, a good mother, a good wife? And I didn't understand. But God was so faithful through the whole thing. He would speak to me often, whether it was through music or through a friend or through the Bible or through visions. There's a wall in my house that I have pictures of all of my kids in a very similar pose. And every time I have another baby, I get another picture with the similar pose. And it hit me that I wasn't going to get to do that with these babies. And that messed me up. That I had kids that I wouldn't get to put on what I call my wall of happy. And when that dawned on me that I wouldn't get to have that, I was laying in bed and I was crying out to God. And I was asking him, Lord, I'm hurting. And I just wish that I could have seen that picture. And God sent me a vision of him holding my baby. Just like the same position of me holding my baby in the other pictures. And he sent me an image of him holding my baby so that I could see that picture along with the others. It didn't matter how angry I got with him. It didn't matter. It didn't matter. He just loved me where I was at. And he was faithful to always be there for me, no matter how angry I was with him. I was put on medication for the depression, and that made me angry. I didn't want to be put on medication. I wanted to be happy. I didn't want to have to be medicated. We had revival at our church, and the special guest was known for walking in signs, miracles, and wonders. And so I went with the hope and excitement that I would get delivered from my depression at this meeting. It was a 3-day long revival. And the first night I went, and he would call out different people, and he would tell them what they were dealing with. God was very clearly speaking through him. And I was watching people get healed of all sorts of different things left and right. But he didn't call me. So I went the next night, and I thought, this one's going to be my night. This is my night to get healed. He called all sorts of different people up. They all got healed. He didn't call me. The third night came, the last night, and I thought, okay, this is it. This is the last night. This has to be it. And I was not called. And I got in my car to go home, and I started yelling again. Started asking God, why? God, I know that you can heal. I know you can do miracles. Why not me? Why don't I get my miracle? And he started talking to me and telling me, you don't have to rely on someone else for your miracle. You don't have to wait for someone to call you up to receive your miracle. You are my child, and you have just as much authority as they do. And if you start speaking words of life, speaking my words out of the Bible, you can receive your miracle without their help. So there in the car, I started screaming at the devil, and I started telling him to back off. I started telling him that he's a punk, and he has no authority over me. He has no authority over my mind. He has no authority over my emotions. And I started declaring that in the name of Jesus, I am healed of depression, and that I don't have to take the medicine anymore, because I will have joy, because I will have God's unspeakable joy, and I don't have to deal with depression anymore. I yelled in my car the entire way home, screaming at the devil. If anybody would have been in that car with me, they probably would have had me taken to a psychological ward. But I got home, and I went to bed, and the next morning I woke up happy for the first time in years. I quit taking the medication cold turkey. I didn't realize at the time that that could be very dangerous, but even if I knew that, I don't think I would have cared. I completely quit taking the medication, and I still have days where depression tries to sneak up on me, but I know that that's not who I am. That's not me. That is not my burden. That is simply the devil trying to take back what he once had. But he does not have that authority over me anymore. And today I walk in freedom from depression. I walk in freedom from poor self-esteem. There are still days that sometimes I look in the mirror and think, I wish that this was a different way, or I wish that this was different. But then I remind myself, and I look at the words on my mirror, do not criticize the Father's work, and I know that I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. I know that my babies are in heaven, that I will see them someday, and I still have a firm belief that I will have a baby girl here on earth with us. And I'm trusting that that will happen. So I want you to also have hope that no matter what you're going through, no matter what you're dealing with, no matter if it's anger that has built up in you for years, the hatred that I had is gone. And instead, I was able to forgive those who hurt me, and I'm able to walk in freedom. And I want you to know that freedom is available for you too.